Hello, I'm Hilary from Frame of Mind Coaching. I'm with Kim Addis, founder and president of Frame of Mind Coaching. Hey, Kim.
Hello.
All right, today I am going to be reading a journal from one of our past clients, actually. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. There is a very skilled welder at our company with a poor record of absenteeism. We've been dealing with a very high volume of work, so we cannot afford to always follow the disciplinary policy laid out in the company's union contract, or else we may lose him. Other unionized employees can see that management sometimes looks the other way with this welder. We are walking a thin line between following company policy and doing what needs to be done to keep up with demand. This is not a long-term strategy, but we would be shooting ourselves in the foot by escalating the disciplinary actions, even if it is the correct decision. How would you help this person?
So my first interest is in why is he absent? That's my first question. What's causing the absenteeism? Is it he can't wake up in the morning, or does he have an issue that really he needs to deal with that maybe we can support him with? Right. So for me, that piece of information is critical. So as a coach, the first thing I always want to do is ask for the story. So what is the story? And I feel like this particular person may be missing that story. So as a coach, what I would do is I would say, we need to get that story. We need to understand why he's absent, what's actually going on, what's at play. Is there something going on in his personal life that's affecting him in a negative way? And if that's the case, and we want to support him because he's actually a really great employee, we want to rally everybody around him in making the exception rather than following the policy and having people think that we are just looking the other way. So we are missing information. Having said that, if this is a guy who is just being neglectful, if he's not able to wake up in the morning, if he's not really dedicated to his job, then what you're actually doing is tolerating his poor behavior for a short-term gain. And I would suggest that I would look at that person, the leader, and ask him how he's thinking about getting other welders. What does he believe to be true? Is that a hard task? Are there other welders available? What's preventing him from getting a lineup of welders so that this guy can go do something else for a living? And so why do we tolerate poor behavior? Because we believe we have no choice, because we believe we have to serve our clients and this is the only way to do it, right? So we believe the beliefs that he has are reflective of limitation, are reflective of the feeling like his hands are tied. And so I would really poke that. I would really challenge that belief and say, what can we put in place immediately to address this problem? There's a third kind of element that's going on here, which is his other welders are looking at the situation and going, hey, you're not being fair. This is inequitable. And so part of what he needs to do is figure out how to communicate his action plan. So either he does rally around this guy and communicate that, or he says, here's the plan. Like, this is not acceptable. There's a 3 strikes you're out rule or whatever it is, and I'm going to follow through, and here's the backup plan if this guy doesn't show up after 3 strikes. So that his actions, his intentions are transparent. So that's part of the problem, is nobody's understanding what he's doing or why he's doing it. And so they're questioning his decision-making. And when employees or welders question his decision-making, he's not establishing trust or loyalty or a belief in him.
So what you're saying is that you think it's important for this leader to also address the other employees and have that conversation about what's going on and why or whatnot.
Well, I think
they're aware.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily, he doesn't need to tell the details of everything, right? But what he needs to do is really be transparent about how he makes decisions and how he takes actions and what leads him to do what he's doing and not doing. Right? So if there is a rule in place, why isn't he following the rule right now? And if there is a rule in place and one of the employees or one of the welders isn't following the rule, here are the actions that will be followed. So he needs to be transparent and he needs to follow through on his decision making. That's very, very important. But if in this case there's an exception, like that, there's something really going on where we need to stand behind this welder and support him, then he needs to be transparent about that too and say, yes, we have an exception and we're going to make an exception. And perhaps without giving away too much detail, here's why.
So everything really always comes back to the leader's thinking. How do they perceive this? What do they think about in terms of, next steps?
Yes, but yes. And what I want to say is that a lot of leaders make decisions without really understanding the whole story, without really getting adequate data, adequate information. And what they do is they see behavior and interpret the behavior to mean something. So in this case, the leader is probably interpreting the welder's behavior as being neglectful. It could be true, but it could not be true. We just don't know. And so what we always want to do is help leaders make decisions with adequate information.
Right. Instead of making assumptions, he needs the facts in order to move forward and make decisions.
That's right. He needs to connect with this welder and say, hey, what's going on? Is there something you're grappling with that we're not aware of? Can we be of service? Can we help? And maybe he does have a waking up problem that is physical in nature. Maybe he has IBS and he needs extra time in the washroom. We don't really know. You're laughing, but we don't know. And maybe
it's very true.
Maybe a simple solution is he starts a little later on in the day, instead of missing the day, So we just don't know. And so what we want to do is encourage the leader to have a conversation, assume positive intent, assume the welder wants to perform, wants to do well, wants to show up, but perhaps there's something else at play that we don't know about.
Interesting. So it really always back to the basics, get the story. Don't make assumptions. Don't assume that you know what's going on or that he's just lazy or get the story. And then you can figure out what your next steps are.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Now, it could be that this welder simply doesn't have the same values as this leader, right? So, and in that case, the guy's not a good fit. And in that case, it's probably better for us to let go of him sooner rather than later and ask the other guys to just, step up for a short period of time until we can fill that role. So again, we need information so that we can make the proper decision.
I like that. That's great. So are there steps in getting the story when we coach our clients?
Well, so the first thing that we want to do when we coach our clients is really check ourselves and make sure that we don't go into the situation, into the conversation, assuming we know what's going on. So in the case of this leader, he has a whole bunch of story in his own mind that says, hey, this guy's slacking off. He's absent all the time. He's not showing up. And perhaps, he's not as dedicated to his job as he should be. And that's all an invention. That's not necessarily true.
Sorry to interrupt you. And that also impacts the leader's feelings, how he feels about the person, and then his behaviors follow.
Correct. So he might go into that conversation attacking, or he might go into that conversation passive aggressive, or he might go into that conversation going, yeah, fine, I'll hear your story, but I know what's really going on, right? So we want to encourage people to suspend their story and say, maybe I don't know what's going on, but I'm curious and I'm eager to learn. So I don't have to be right? I'm not going into this conversation. I'm not here to prove my rightness. I'm here to really have a conversation. I'm here to understand. I'm here to communicate. I'm here to extract relevant information so that I can have a greater understanding of what's actually going on.
And how would an employee feel that way with that approach as opposed to the old style, before all this coaching came into the world and people actually thought about their thoughts, right? And how they behaved, it would have just been an assumption and you're late and, discipline. So how would the client feel now when they're approached by their leader who's really curious and interested and wants to understand them?
You mean the employee? Well, so the employee, if the employee doesn't feel attacked, if the employee feels like the leader genuinely and authentically cares what happens? Then the employee wants to work harder. The employee wants to make it work. The employee wants to make a difference. The employee, right?
They feel valued. They feel
Exactly.
cared for. And so they
Exactly.
want to step up their game and be more productive.
Right. So, here's the thing. Leaders often forget what is their goal. Right? So when they come into the conversation, they think, well, my goal in this conversation is to get the guy to be absent less. Right? But that's only the short-term goal. The
Right.
real goal is not only to get the guy to be absent less, the real goal is to have dedicated employees who set a standard, become the model. Your goal is to have long-term employees who are not only absent less, but are totally passionate and dedicated to their work. So,
that's right.
Right? So when we come in accusing them of not showing up, do we generate dedicated, loyal employees? No, we generate employees who are there for a paycheck. And so the question becomes, what is our goal? And does our approach line up with the goal? And very often it doesn't. Very often our approach serves to solve a short-term problem, or attempts to solve a short-term problem, doesn't really take into consideration the actual long-term goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Excellent. So, we come across, or I've come across a lot of leaders who talk about, they have employees in their companies that are really not, carrying their weight or doing their job, but they tend to keep them there. Whether it's, out of fear of finding a replacement, or they've got a high demand project that needs to be finished, and they just feel like they have no choices. So what do you say to those leaders who feel like they just keep these employees that really don't help them or serve the company?
Well, so there's two parts to it. So, if an employee's term is over, like they're just done, right? So the question is, why are you keeping them? What do you believe to be true about keeping them? A lot of times we keep people because we think, well, they've been here long enough. I'm not just going to get rid of them. So they accept
something.
Yeah, I owe them something, and they accept mediocrity. And so that's a problem with the leader's thinking. But I would also encourage them to say, like, why is this person performing this way? Like, what's actually happening? Perhaps you don't realize as a leader that over the years, you've tied this person's hands, and that person isn't necessarily motivated, and that person believes they can't make certain decisions or take certain initiative. And so they're like hanging out because they're afraid that if they do take an initiative, they might be reprimanded. So leaders aren't aware of the behavior that they come to the table with and how that impacts their employees. And so employees behave in ways that are reflective of their own beliefs.
Sure.
Unfortunately, leaders play a huge role in helping employees form their beliefs, but that is happening at such an unconscious level.
Yeah, absolutely.
That leaders end up going, well, it's their fault. They don't necessarily take responsibility for the part they play. So at all times, I always want to start off with the leader and look at how the leader thinks about the employee and the way that the leader behaves and how that behavior might lead the employee to behave the way the employee behaves.
Right. I just had an idea. Like, so if you had an aggressive leader who is always kind of breathing down their employees' backs, and you have this one employee who's really not taking initiative, well, maybe because he's fearful of doing anything different or taking initiative because of the way his leader behaves with him.
Right. Or making a mistake or causing a problem or taking any kind of risk or taking initiative or anything. Right.
And then that goes back to what you just said. Look at the leader and how they're behaving and how they're thinking and how it impacts.
So the other part of it is, and we keep talking about this, but if a leader sees an employee as being mediocre, the employee lives up to that vision.
Right. Yeah.
And so how the leader views the people in front of them will make a huge difference in the behaviors of their employees.
Yeah, I know that firsthand, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
You want to share?
Well, when I have a leader that, has a vision of me in a very high light, a very, really up here, and sees me as maybe how I don't see myself, I want to live up to that, man. Like, I want to be that person. I'm like, wow, she sees me like this. that's who I really want to be. So it gives you room to grow, and it gives you the ability to have that space to say, yeah, I can do that. I can get there because she sees me as that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I often tell a story when I'm speaking of this time when I was in university. I graduated with an undergraduate degree in psychology. I was young, 20 years old, wasn't sure what I wanted to do next, kind of spinning in circles. And I got accepted to taking a course, a single master's level course called the Psychology of Education.
Mm-hmm.
And the course was like, maybe 20 people in the class. It was a U-shaped experience, lots of discussion, lots of debate. And I was the youngest kid in the class. I was 20. Everyone else was 35, 40 and up. So
wow.
I was like a little bit like a fish out of water, but there I was, participating and getting involved. Yeah. And at the end of the semester, the professor said, hey, okay, everybody needs to register for their one-on-one oral exam with me. And I totally freaked out. I'm like, oh my God, I've never had an oral exam. What's he going to ask us? And I'm the youngest kid in the class, and I'm not really even registered for this master's degree. Who am I fooling? But anyways, I studied very hard. I went to the exam. He asked me a bunch of questions about Skinner and Freud and Albert Ellis and Jung and all the famous psychologists and how they relate to one another. And I answered the questions to the best of my ability. And at the end, he said, my God, you must have a very high IQ. And I was shocked. Because I never thought of myself as particularly bright. I never thought that I was very intelligent. I was never a genius in school. I was always like a B+, A- student. I was never an academic, success story.
Yeah.
Nothing special, right? Nothing to write home about. And suddenly someone in front of me saw me in a way that I never saw myself. And I remember feeling like my jaw was on the floor hearing this. And I remember walking home after that exam going, is it possible? Did I just fool him? Does he see something in me that I don't see? But for the first time in my life, I considered that maybe I'm not that dumb after all, or that maybe I have some smarts. And so he was the first person who saw me in a light that I did not see myself. And that's what I encourage leaders to do, is to see your employees in a light that they do not see themselves.
Yeah. And that really shifted your self-image, and right?
Huge.
Impacted you, a lot, like moving forward in your life.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was the first time I ever heard anything like that. And to be honest, I didn't absorb it right away. It didn't just go in, oh, he says I'm smart, so therefore I must be smart. Right. No, it took years.
You challenged your beliefs. Your beliefs were not aligned with what he said.
It took years, but and I understand, now there are lots of places where I am not intellectually strong, but there are some places where I know that things come to me with far greater ease than other people. So sure. I know what my lane is, but I also don't downplay it. Right. So that's
right. Right. Amazing. Great topic today. Love this conversation. So we're ending the end of the podcast. Sorry. And, we want to invite all of our listeners to visit frameofmindcoaching.com. Sign up for a complimentary coaching call. You will learn a lot about yourself. We'll open your eyes. We'll get the juices flowing. Get that thinking to shift a little bit on that call. If you want a flavor for that, reach out and sign up. Love to see you.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Cam. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.